Hi, everyone. It's Plastic EP here. This is a worldwide event. Beatlemania, the original 3 Pauls. This is not going to happen every day. So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Charles Rosenay, please introduce the fantastic 3 Pauls from Broadway, Beatlemania.
Well, we got 3 groovy guys. 3 of
we got to hear the theme song.
New York, Broadway, Paul McCartney's. We've got Alan LaBeouf. We've got Lenny Colacino and Mitch Weissman. This is like, for people who love Beatlemania, this is history right here.
Here we are.
Fantastic. So who's going to start about their memories of Beatlemania? I've got to ask Mitch first because he was the first person that played the first Paul on Broadway. So I've got to ask you what the memory of that was, Mitch, opening night, how big and fantastic that was. Because I believe all your friends from Studio 54 crossed the road to come and see you.
Well, I'm not sure if they were all there at the show. I mean, I think Tyler was, Steven Tyler was. Andy was not at the show, but he was just a friend of mine. Andy Warhol, he was a friend of mine from club nights and stuff like that before that. And Michael, I had never met. Michael Jackson, never met. But I mean, a lot of people were there. It's funny. I had I had an aunt, Audrey. The most I remember of that night, aside from being absolutely fantastic, and Murray being the Murray the K, and it was a lot of fun. Was my aunt kept asking my dad to get tickets for the show, and my beautiful niece or a cousin, Sarah, tells me years later that what happened was that I found out shortly after she wanted tickets in the 3rd row, and my dad ended up buying the tickets. You know, they were not a lot of money in those days. Remember, our top ticket was like $13.50 or something like that. So we bought tickets for her and her husband and the 2 little kids. And it rained on opening night, and she didn't go. So they had to fill it with whatever what do they call it when they put people in the seats?
Seat fillers.
Seat fillers. There you go. Okay. Gee, that's complicated. Okay. So yeah, so the 4 empty seats in the second or 3rd row, because she didn't show up because she wouldn't let her kids go out in the rain. My aunt was very, very strange woman, but that was the first take that I thought of from then. But after we did the run-throughs up in Boston 2 weeks before we came to Broadway, those were more memorable sort of shows because of the significance and the disasters and all the stuff that happened up there. Except we had a great time. We had a phenomenal time. It was fun. Did John Ackman? I don't think you guys were around at that point. Lenny, you might have been, but John Ackman walked right off the stage into the orchestra pit. Was that on
I heard
Broadway?
that story.
He was like fed up with us.
Yeah.
He was fed up with everybody, and all of a sudden he just backed up and went, "That's it," and he walked off the stage and disappeared to the orchestra pit. I thought he was dead. We went over ran to the edge, and he was just like, "Holy crap!" So he was fine, but it's like insane. Yeah, it was done. We used to drive John Ackman crazy. This is not opening night, but I could never get the lyrics right to Michelle or "Fool on the Hill." Either one. I mean, "I love you," "I want you," whatever it was, Michelle. So "Fool on the Hill." I would sing the wrong verses in the wrong order, the same way I used to mix up "I love you," I want you. I mean, I missed those up. Now, yeah. At that point in time, they strictly followed the book, the lyric book, or the guidebook, and all the lighting cues went off of the lyrics. So if we sang the wrong lyrics, it kind of screwed everybody up, because this was before the age of full automation. So we had guys back there pulling the levers and moving the screen inside and out, and Ackman would be following the lyrics in the book, and I would go off lyric, and he would miss cues. And I remember one night I'm watching it, and he just took the book and threw it up in the air with his hands on it. Just went, "That's it, I'm done." So the guys, this was a little bit into the run, so everybody just did their own lighting cues, what they could remember. And the problem with that is it's like the same thing with me. I had that stupid song list of 29 songs on the floor next to my mic stand. And even though I did the show how many times, if you took the list away from me, I didn't remember what the next song was. It was insane.
Wow. I never knew that.
I always need a list. Yeah, no, it was such a crutch. The same thing, 2012, when I went on tour with the Turtles and Mickey Dolenz and stuff like that, I had the sheet music on music stands. You're allowed to have it, but I had to wean myself off it, because if when you wouldn't memorize anything if everything was out there. So I finally just threw the sheet music in the back and went, holy fuck, what happens now? So, it's crazy. Alan, do you remember the first words you said to me when we first met in the stairwell?
No, I don't. What did I say? Hello, nice to meet you.
Upstairs, we were introduced probably by Sandy. Oh, yeah, something like that, except the very first words out of your mouth were, holy crap, I'll bet you even fart like him.
Yes. Something polite and cerebral as always,
Yes, it was fantastic. It endeared me to you for all these years. It was fantastic.
That's so funny that you remember that. That's just...
Alan and Lenny, you have first memories of onstage Beatlemania?
Yes.
Yeah, I was terrified because for some reason, we should mention there was another Paul, and his name is Reed Kaling. He was absent for a while, and my band was scheduled to make their debut in April, I believe, of 1978. So I had a long history of watching the show before I actually got on stage rehearsing with my band. And I was thrust into the situation where my first show was with what we call Bunk 2, which was the second band. And I'd never played with those guys before. And suddenly you're on. Every band had their little different way of doing things, who was singing which parts, because they weren't really stapled down at the time. So it was tremendously nerve-wracking because it was the late show on Saturday night. And if you guys remember, we did 3 shows on Saturday, one at 2 p.m., one at 7 p.m., and one at 10. So I had to sit through 2 shows, being an absolute nervous wreck, wondering how this was going to go. By the time I got on at 10 o'clock, I was kind of numb. I have a vague recollection of being on the stage. And as the guys know, the stage was slanted. There was an angle.
What they call the raked stage. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I wasn't accustomed to that either, because if you take a wrong step, you'll end up like John Ackman and go through the scrim and into the orchestra pit, which would have been a very auspicious debut. But I certainly got through it okay.
Who was Bunk 2? We know Bunk 1 was Mitch, Leslie Fratkin, Justin McNeil, and Joe Pecorino. Who was Bunk 2?
Reed Kaling, P.M. Howard, Randy Clark, and Bobby Taylor on drums.
Gotcha. Now, you were the first lefty McCartney, is that correct?
Well, full-time, yeah. I remember Mitch did a couple of shows, which I watched from the wings, and my hat's off to anybody who can play on their opposite side. It's almost impossible. But I think Mitch is actually a natural lefty. Am I right, Mitch?
Yeah. I was born left-handed, but there was nothing left-handed to play back then. So yeah.
Yeah. So I was the first full-time lefty, and I recall that our dear departed stage manager Bob Strauss looked at me and said, "Your guitar is going in the wrong direction. What's wrong with that?" And he was dead serious. I said, "No, yeah." Well, it helped to be left-handed. Let's just put it that way. In any other aspect of life, it's a burden, but playing McCartney, it helps.
There was certain important things we couldn't do. We couldn't do the signature Beatle moves when you're right-handed, like songs like "She Loves You." Think you've lost your love. You can't go on the mic to George and Paul converge and sing. "Oh yes," they couldn't do that because
that V look.
Stabbing it with my bass guitar if we attempted it. So there's no good way to do it. We tried several different ways, and we decided to not do it at all. So,
Alan, were you in a separate bunk, or were you like?
Yes, Bunk 3. Bunk 3 was
Bunk 3.
Me with Tom Teely, Mark Vocaccio, and Bennett Gale. So all wonderful musicians. Some of my greatest times in my life were the sound checks for the Beatlemania. You remember
the sound checks were great. I mean, I used to watch those sound checks. One of the songs that the Metro Men did was born of one of your guys' sound checks. This song called "She's Just a Friend of Mine," and I actually ended up writing that song with Tom. But the riff, that whole thing, came from you guys literally playing it for like a half an hour on stage during.
And who could forget the great song "Lenny's Mother"?
I can't. It's a fantastic song.
Yeah, it is, and I'm glad no one has a copy right now.
I don't have a copy. No.
Can you give us an impromptu version of it?
I'm trying to think of a clean lyric.
There's none. Trust me, there's none. It was.
I'll try this one. She had a thing for my Louisville slugger, Lenny's mother.
Yeah.
It was all Farquhar. Farquhar was insane.
May he rest in peace. Yes.
Yes, definitely.
And thanks to Farquhar passed away from colon cancer. And before he left this world, he put out a mass email just encouraging all the Beatlemania people to get regular colonoscopies to avoid his fate. And we all have. So we loved him then, and we remember him very fondly.
I'm having a colonoscopy right now, as a matter of fact.
I'm having a colon escapade. That's what I'm having.
Yeah.
Classic. When Beatlemania was like at its peak, there was shows on New York. It was in Chicago. It was L.A. It was London. Was there an Australian version of Beatlemania on stage?
No, the closest we got was New Zealand, and that was I did that in 1983. And as probably EP knows, New Zealand's not exactly an easy swim from Australia.
I also got to say with New Zealand, because I've been there, you land with a plane and it's got a very short runway.
Yes.
So you have to hope that they actually break in time so you don't keep going into the ocean.
Yeah, we did 7 weeks in New Zealand, and it was quite an experience. I loved my time there.
There are definitely photos of you guys on the landing on the ice, the glaciers.
Yes, we flew up to the glacier, and that was really. If you've seen Lord of the Rings, then you know what New Zealand looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Unbelievable.
I've got to say with Beatlemania, the performances on Broadway, I believe, were 1,006. Mitch, how many shows do you reckon you actually did?
I don't know. It's not. I've never been one to count those, and I'm sure there's a list of it somewhere. I mean, I found all kinds of statistics on Google about myself that I've never known. It ran for a long time. I left it to open the show in California in January of '78. Went to Chicago in June, came back in the fall, and then ran with it till the end at the Lunt and the Palace.
The Palace.
I mean, we went on for a long time, so it was pretty crazy.
So it started Winter Garden, then Lunt-Fontanne, then the Palace. Amongst the three of you, do you know who played Paul the most on Broadway?
I would have to say it's Mitch, probably, but
Alan. I think
maybe Alan. Because Alan, you say from what? From when I left. But you started playing in the January of '78 show, and you were with me all the way to the end.
You know what? I might have spent more time in New York, but you might have done more shows only because you did so many per week when you started out, because you were the face of the franchise starting out. You were TV commercials, so they wanted to see you. So they abused you horribly.
Yes, whether I was dying or not. I mean, one of the performances in New York was Brian Brawley, who was managing McCartney at the time, came backstage, and I had vocal issues. I used to, as I put it in 1978, my voice didn't catch up with my face until 1978 when we got to California. So I would do these shows, maybe 5 shows a week, and then I'd start getting raspy, and then Reed would get on stage. To the rest. Oh, sorry.
Okay, who are your favorite Lennons, Harrisons, and Ringos to work with? Alan, can we start with you, and then we'll go Lenny and Mitch?
I just think about all musicians is like who reminds you of the joy of Tom Teely was a guy I got to play with, and you guys all agree with me. He plays in such a way, he reminds you of that joyful feeling when you played your first chords with a band and you just looked around you and went, wow, we're making music, and that joy, stayed with Tom, is with Tom to this day. And I just, I was very fortunate to work with him. And, Mark Boccaccio was the same way. Very, very
He was
focused.
great. Yeah.
Mark loved that audience. And at the end of the show, he and the audience were one thing. It was just so I love those guys.
I don't know.
Guys. It was just such a shame. I was telling the EP before, the only Paul I've ever got to work with on stage was Lenny, because Bob Miller, the George, had to run up to Canada for some emergency, and I was the only guy around to fill in as George.
Wow.
In
That's
Atlantic
funny.
City. So
I don't
So-
remember that at all, Alan.
Honestly, you don't remember?
Len, before we pass the question to you, I just want to tell the folks who are watching that Farquhar, which is his stage name, went out for a little while in 1980 as did a show called Imagine.
Mhm.
It's the only time I think that I almost fainted. My breath was taken away by how immaculate a show it was. It was like watching John on stage. It was so unbelievable. Randy Clark took his place eventually and did a great job. But that'll always be. He went on to play in a group called Strawberry Field with Tony Garofalo, who last just interviewed. Yeah, that's my best memory of him. Lenny, what about you? Who were some of your favorite cohorts there?
I would echo what Alan said, because I got to play with Tom quite frequently, Tom Teely, who was George, a consummate musician, and we had very similar senses of humor, and that certainly helped. And I played many shows with Mark as well. Mark Viccaccio, a consummate performer. He was a terrific guitarist, and well, he really defined playing rhythm guitar. And the other person I'll mention, because we did a bus and truck for a couple of years with Joe Pecorino, the aforementioned Joe Pecorino, and I loved playing and singing with Joe. And I believe Mitch might know this better than I, that Joe actually auditioned for the role of McCartney, but when he saw Mitch, he said, "I better go elsewhere. This is not going to work."
Yeah, Joey. We all had the first auditions were at SIR in New York. We all had individual auditions, and so when they had the callbacks, of which I almost didn't go to it because I was supposed to drive a local drummer, Ricky Shutter, who played in Broadway shows and stuff like that, up to start a national tour of Godspell in Rhode Island. So I remember the office called me and said, "Can you come on a Wednesday?" And I went, "No." And they freaked. And Lieber got on the phone. It was the assistants had called, and they said, "Like, what do you mean you can't go?" I said, "I promised everybody I'd drive him." He said, "Well, can you get him there later in the day and come in?" So I did. So I walk in, and there's, as Joey describes it, different era Beatles. Paul from 65, George from 70, whatever it was. I mean, there was just every different era, including Hispanic Pauls, a couple of black guys, because nobody knew what it was for. The original ad was wanted singers, musicians, Beatle lookalikes for unique opportunity. Call Mrs. Price and the Lieber Krebs 212 number. So he, as he puts it, he sat there on the, he sat on the couch and he sees me walk in. And his reaction was, "Holy shit, what is Paul McCartney doing here?" He didn't have his glasses on. And he eventually put his glasses on, came over, we talked a little bit, and that's, as Lenny said, he just said, "I better start singing the Lennon part." So he had got a call back as a Paul, and then decided to switch over to Lennon. Put his little round glasses on anyway, and he got away with it. His voice was in better shape as a McCartney than mine until I said, until my face caught up with my voice caught up with my face. You know, it's interesting, as Lenny said, we used to switch around the vocal parts, and that had to do with me. In the beginning, when the first cast was rehearsing, my falsettos, I was just telling them, Len, that is from what you said. I was telling them that as per what you said, the vocal parts started changing because of myself. My vocal limitations caused people to sing different parts, just not to strain the heavily McCartney song listings. So Leslie used to sing the high part Nowhere Man, and I would sing the George parts. We would switch. I mean, I didn't switch with Joey on If I Fell the way Farquhar and Alan switched on If I Fell. No, it wasn't Farquhar. Who was it? Was he? It was Reed and Randy Cook. But didn't you switch, Lenny? You used to sing the high part in If I Fell.
Every now and then. As a matter of fact, when we were on the bus and truck, Joe wanted to sing the high part. It was his way of playing.
Yeah, he could. He could do it all the time. And the thing was, but
we switched.
We switched, and there were certain parts harmonies that I would switch and sing to something else.
Maybe I missed this part, Mitch, but we mentioned there were 29 songs in the show, but 19 were sung by Paul, and it was a ridiculous burden to put on anybody.
And originally, the song list was 36 songs, and of course we had George in there. We had a couple of George songs, I don't think we had another Ringo song, and there were more Lennon songs. But by the time we got to Broadway, it was down to those 29.
But the thing is with the McCartney parts, it's not just the lead vocals he sings. Some of the background vocal parts are just so tiring. You can't believe it. Like in Nowhere
Yeah,
Man.
that's why we switched. That's why
Lucy,
we switched.
At some
Lucy,
point,
this guy with diamonds, that's,
Yeah, holy crap! I switched with Leslie on that too until 1978 when I was able to sing all the parts, and even on that tour in 1980 when we first went to Canada with Tony Kishman, myself, Joey, and the other guys in the band. By that point in time it was like what do you call it? What's his name? The big David Cole, the big producer up in Canada, had us doing 3 shows a week. Like there was like 12 shows a week up there. And at that point in time, it was like, okay, I always remember telling the guys for years, one day, one of you is going to want to take a night off. I mean, but in the meantime, they were always like furious with me for opening the shows. 2 weeks in, the McCartneys were always very upset when we go on the road because they pull me in for the reviews and then I'd leave and I'd feel guilty about it, but I'm hired to do a job. But by the time we got to Canada, Tony would go like, you want to go on tonight? Do you want to go on all 3 shows tonight? Do you want to we all became Iron Men. I mean, I remember there was one week I did 9 shows in a row on a 3 on Friday, 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday. If you'd asked me, could I ever have done that in 77 or 78? Not in a million years. So you kind of grow into the role somehow. In my case, I did.
Now, I've got to ask you, did any of the real Beatles come to see any of the shows, or did George Martin come? Any of the Beatle Cup people come to see any of the shows?
It was rumored that Murray the K snuck in John Lennon for the first half of the show. I think he saw Mitch. And I think that was the rumor. Did you hear that same rumor, Mitch?
I didn't hear the rumor, and I would have thought that Lennon would have told me those 3 times that we met the very first time. He had said to me on the street, he said, you should said, hello, Paul. Good morning, Paul. How are you, Paul? And I started laughing at it, but I was frozen from head to toe, carrying groceries and wearing my glasses, my aviator glasses and stuff, going like, how does he recognize me? He's in Yoko. He pulled me out of the street. I was still standing in the street. It was a big, giant snowstorm. So he said, my 16-year-old saw the show. He said, Dad, the guy who plays you doesn't look anything like you, but you got to see the guy who plays Paul. He looks just like him, doesn't he, honey? So she went, yeah, he does. So I'm just sitting there like shaking, carrying groceries and wall mounting rods on my stuff like that. And he said to me, how do you do so many shows? I would have thought at that point in time he would have told me I saw you play, but he said that Julian saw me play, and he saw that. So yeah, I don't think it, the next 2 times he never mentioned it either. So I'm pretty sure he didn't get snuck in. There is a rumor that McCartney went in back when the touring company, the bus and truck, went down to the minimalism version. I don't think the one you had, Lenny. You had more scrims and stuff.
No. That was Apple came when we played in Beverly Hills for like 3 weeks. Yeah. They sent a crew. Apple sent a crew to tape the show for the lawsuit that ensued. So I had the thought that somewhere in England that McCartney was lighting up and watching, our show. I don't know if that ever happened, but I know that our performance in Beverly Hills was used in the lawsuit.
Yeah, and it was almost seriously going to make it an impairment. But I remember meeting with Larry Iser and set up a meeting with him. He was the attorney for Apple, for the Beatles. And we met at the Carlisle Hotel about 3 blocks from my apartment on 60th Street. And we had met in a conference room. And he said to me, you don't mind if I tape this to you? And he took the recorder out, put it on the table. And I went, no, you don't mind if I record this to you? I put my recorder right there next to his. And we had this big meeting, and he found out that I had the scrapbooks. And then I had that 45-minute show from Japan where NHK television over there filmed the performance of Beatlemania. And it shows in my scrapbooks, all the interviews, it said that, if we said we were the Beatles, and I never did, but there was that 6-point disclaimer, not the Beatles, an incredible simulation. I made the argument to him that you can't fault the press and the guys who are only 20 some odd years old saying, when somebody asks a question, so you're playing Paul McCartney, and they say yes, the indemnification is already there. And the next thing I said is, by the way, if you want to see what a national media, worldwide media network thought of Beatlemania, you can view this videotape, and it shows that the NHK cameraman spent more than 30 minutes out of the 45 minutes of filming all the visuals. And to hell with the band. That's the reason why the show is bigger than any of us.
Well, the other thing is that, you know, we probably did more promo work for the actual Beatles and enhanced their catalog than they knew at the time.
Yeah. I mean, people went out and bought Beatle records. I mean, it's for years. I remember Gene Simmons talking to me at one point when I was doing the Animalize stuff and we were friends. He said, why don't you do a tribute record, do a McCartney record? And some of the bands were doing them and not paying royalties and stuff like that. I said, Gene, just there's Beatle records. Why in the world would I want to do copies of this? It's a great compliment. I understand that, but I'd rather perform live.
Yeah, it was the live performance that had gravitas because they weren't playing, and none of them were playing actually. So a live performance, you know, we're going to stop people from playing Mozart or Bach. You know, no. So in that way, I always felt it was legitimate. You know.
But you guys, you say that, but yet there was a Beatlemania album.
Well,
right?
that has to do with the producers, you know, getting an offer from Arista, and Arista, and they wanted to, you know, make some more money and have a marketing thing to sell in there. I mean, in other words, I didn't want to do it in my personal life, make a CD and sell them at my show, at any shows. Not that I was doing a lot of shows in the '80s, but you know, they had a Broadway show. And why not have an album? And why not make it a cast album? And it actually got up for a Grammy Award. And I think Sandy Yaguda, who was listed as a producer, was nominated for a Grammy. I remember we did the shows at the end of the week because the audience reaction was so much stronger, starting from the Wednesday matinees and stuff like that. But my voice was tanking and going downhill by the end of the week. And then the irony is that they fed in audience tracks. And you have that same stupid whistle, like every 20 minutes on the record of an audience member doing whatever. I've heard that before, like 4 songs ago. So they did reinforce it that way with audience sound and stuff. But I think we did. It's funny. We were at the record plant doing the overdubs, and we did very minimal overdubs. But Joey wanted to double track his Revolution vocal track the same way Lennon did it, on the floor in the dark, singing a double track. With a mic hanging over his head.
That's funny.
Lying flat. Mitch, there's a lot of Michael Jackson fans now. I want you to recall for me, please, the first time you met Michael Jackson and what conversation you had. Also, any other celebrities that stand out from that period.
We're getting off the McCartney theme here. The 3 McCartneys.
Yeah, I know, but I just got to know.
3 tenors. Hey, we're the 3 tenors. There we go.
Meeting Michael Jackson, okay?
Well, the Michael Jackson one is the opening night of Beatlemania, the unofficial opening night party at Studio 54. That same night that my aunt didn't let my niece and nephew show up. Steven Tyler came and we walked up from the theater. And with Bob Kelleher, his handler at the time, as well as the production manager for Aerosmith. So we walk up and we get in the front door and we walk in, the flash bulbs are going off and it's kind of crazy. And I remember we met Bella Abzug, of all people. There's a photo of us with Bella, which is hysterical.
A real babe.
Real babe, and a powerful New York politician. So, but we pose for a picture, and then we get inside, and the doors are closed behind us. You can see the doors. And as we're all taking pictures, this guy comes over, Andy Warhol comes over to me at a pause in the pictures and says to me, Mitch, what's happening? I said, the show opened tonight. He says, oh, can I be in the picture? And I went like, yes, you can be in the picture. And I grabbed him, and he comes in. There's a picture of us with Andy. And then as we're standing there, and Steven Tyler was in the picture too, because that was the pose I think we were doing, was the 4 of us with Steven, because he was a Lieber Krebs act, our management producer act. So then Michael comes over and slips his hand between Andy and me, and says, hi, I'm Michael. Happy birthday. Like, what? How does he even know it's my birthday? Now, I used to tell the story that the show opened on my birthday. It wasn't, as it actually was weeks later, I believe. Justin actually has the the right time. But he had known it was my birthday, and I said, I know who you are. Thank you. And we stood there, we posed for some more pictures. And then later on, when we were talking, it's funny, you see the picture of me with him against the white wall. This is way before the commercial tie-ins, before all the logos on the walls that you see celebrities standing in front of. And I said to him, I said, how did you get invited? And he said, well, my office got a call from a guy, I can't remember his name now, but my dad had an attorney in his office whose brother worked with the Jackson 5. And he asked my father, do you mind if I invite Michael to the premiere? And that went right over my dad's head. Michael who? Yeah, invite him. So he invited him, and that's how he showed up to the opening. He said, my representation said you were invited to the Beatlemania premiere. He said, no, the guy's father invited me already. So he was very, very nice, and that's the only time I met him. It's not the first time. It's the only time. That's it. Yeah. Is
that when you told him to buy the royalties?
No, I wish I had, because maybe I could have gotten a piece of it. At that point in time, who knew that they were going to have any problems with royalties? I mean, it's, who knew that McCartney was going to let it fall apart? I don't know. It's crazy.
Now, I've got to ask you about the motion picture. Come on. You got to tell me about the Beatlemania motion picture.
All right, somebody else talk about it now.
I saw it.
Yes, and I saw it too. I saw it in a very empty Ziegfeld theater. Me and Joe and the first practice wife, and we went to the Ziegfeld to watch it. There was like 25 people in there. It actually had surround sound because I saw Jaws there. I saw Star Wars there, and I still had the big speakers in the front. So it was pretty amazing, and it's actually pretty brutal to watch because the soundtrack was terrible. Andy did a great job mixing. Andy doesn't even know where these tapes are, but I told him I heard board tapes of him mixing it the way it should have been mixed, not the way the Landaus wanted it, where the music would be kind of crummy in the beginning, sound like 60s, and then get better as it went to the end. You remember watching Michelle? The vocal is panned way the hell over there, and the music is over on that side. So I mean, it's not the best soundtrack under the sun, but there are some great board tapes that Andy mixed correctly, and he doesn't remember to this day that he ever did them because he played them for me. So
the screams for remastering, Mitch, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I'm not sure.
A 10 CD set, I think.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that.
Who was the lineup?
The sound. Say that again.
Who was the lineup for the film?
Tom Teely, again, the most beloved guitar player I know from Beatlemania. I mean, seriously, what a great guy and musician. I remember seeing his audition at SIR when he put the stuff behind his ears to have his ears go out like George's.
It was a coat hanger.
What was a coat hanger? Wow. He told me years later that he was so nervous because I walked into the room while he had to do his audition.
Well, you did the same to me, you bastard.
Yeah. Well, it's good. He probably was. Yeah. Well, you remember when I snuck into Joey did audition for the movie, and they didn't want him. They didn't even require him to.
Yeah.
And they asked me. I mean, I remember the reason why they went with David Leon is because I insisted that David come out, because when I sang with David in '78. As far as I could tell, we were off all the time. I mean, I used to call it the Beatlemania of law of physics. My bass sounded out a certain way. It was actually perfect because I would hear it from the house and go, oh, it's in tune. But on stage, audio, sonically, it was sharp. It's like when you do jingles, Lenny. You try to sing with the headphones on, and it sounds off. You take one headphone off, and you realize, okay, I'm singing fine. So I used to call it the Beatlemania law of physics. But with David and I, all I could remember at the end of the LA run, when I used to sub for Jim Cushing, that it just sounded terrible. I mean, it was, and yet it sounded great in the house. So I insisted they bring him in. Now, Joey, they weren't even going to tell about the audition. So the last time I saw Lenny and Joey play, I drove up to somewhere in upstate New York.
I think it was Poughkeepsie.
It was Poughkeepsie, the outdoor show. And Tony and I sat in the back and watched from the soundboard and tried not to make you nervous. And you actually sounded great because you didn't know I was there. It was just fantastic. It was fantastic.
I'm nervous now, Mitch.
I'm nervous now too, boys. Trust me.
Was the Ringo Castelli? Was it Ralph Castelli?
In the movie,
bus?
yes, it was
No.
Tom Tilley, me, and Ralph, and then was it Bob Forte in the bus and truck still?
No, it was. I think it was. It could have been Al Sapienza, and it could have been.
By that point,
it could have been Cy Garayeb as well.
I think it was Al first. I can't remember, but then the John of the movie was David Leon.
Right.
Joey, they didn't tell Joey about the auditions, and we're in New York, listening to people. Phil Ramone had already told them up front, listen, if you are making a movie, you might as well get a great lookalike guy, and you can dub in the vocals with a better sound-alike guy. Well, David actually proved to himself when he came out after 2 years and we sang together that, okay, there's no problem here. Either I was just as insane in 1978, or we actually got our shit together easier to blend and sing. So, but Joey comes bursting into SIR to audition, and he had just had his wisdom teeth taken out. So he's coming in like a chipmunk. And of course, he's the nervous Joey and going like this and whatever with his hair. So yeah, exactly. So he got up on stage and he sang his parts and he sounded great. And he didn't talk to anybody. He was really pissed off. He was pissed off at Sandy because nobody called him to do it. And I actually think I called him to tell him you should go do this because they didn't want to even consider him because he didn't, quote unquote, look like Lennon.
Hey, Plastic, do we have any texts coming in at all?
We've got so many texts that I want to go through the text, but before I do that, I've got to ask, when did they close the Broadway show and why?
Go ahead, boys.
Well, they finally gave in to public pressure and shut us right down. No, that's not right.
If it was public pressure, we still would have been there.
Actually, it had its run. I mean, on Broadway, when you run for 2 years, that's an enormous run. And so it was approaching 2 years. They're coming toward the end, but they kept it going a little longer because they needed that theater, the Palace Theater, to record the movie. So they kept it going a little more advertising money. Kept it going. They had a big.
They found Bill Sargent, the big promoter, who put the money into it. Lieber Krebs actually let him take over the show, and he bought the rights. He kept it running. He had Gemini running on Broadway. It's going to be some party with Danny Aiello, and then we were at the Palace, and as Tom used to call it, the wonderful Tom, the Lunt Fun Winter Palace tour. So we ended up we played there, but I remember that Lieber Krebs was dropping the ball on a lot of stuff in terms of even like there was the big giant Christmas bonus debacle where it came time to Christmas time. They used to give you gift probably $1,000 or something like that for Christmas bonuses. These guys are making money left over hand and fist. And they has to put up a note on the board saying Christmas is going to be a little late this year, guys.
I remember that. Yeah.
And for the entire next year, we kept going. So, did you get your Christmas bonus yet? Get your Christmas bonus. So Bill Sargent took over the show, and he was having his own money problems. But if he bounced a check on us, you went to his office. He handed you the $1,000 in cash and a bottle of Dom Perignon and sent you on his way. And you went, this guy's better than anything Lieber. I mean, we were so fed up with Lieber Krebs at that point in time that it was just like, this is the most wonderful man in the world. But eventually he ran out of money, and that was the end of that.
As a follow-up to Plastic's question, who were the last four standing? Who were the last four guys who were played Beatlemania on Broadway?
There were actually 8, really. I mean, the last 4 could have been me. Remember, there's that video that's on YouTube, Lenny, of the night Beatlemania closed.
Well, it's you and Joe and Gigi. I forget. Is Tom in that thing? Yeah.
I think Tony. I think is videoing it. I can't remember what it is.
Right.
Tom's in it. Yeah, Tom's in it. Definitely. Yeah.
So I don't know. I wasn't there. I was in Chicago or someplace.
That's right. You were there. You went to Chicago. So we came back, and it was Leslie wasn't Leslie gone by then? No, Leslie was.
No, Justin was gone by then.
Yeah, Justin got left behind in Chicago because he just wouldn't rehearse. I mean, there's some great stories there. We all went in into the guys that we all need to rehearse. And Joey's practicing his piano parts and I'm practicing the bass parts. And I remember having to show Justin how to do the fill again to Day in the Life, the boom, 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 and because he just had forgotten everything. He was being managed by an old-time manager, Bullets Durgam at the time. He had these great blonde girlfriends on his arm. I mean, he was, and he says to this day, I was just an idiot back then. But he came in, and we're in SIR in Chicago, and we're trying to rehearse, and Joey says something to him, and very diplomatically, and we're all rehearsing our parts, and then he says to me, the only reason I'm here is because you guys need the work. And Joe lunged for him across the piano and almost took his head off. So Lola Shumlin, our wonderful stage manager.
I remember her.
Yeah, so Lola, Ralph ended up playing all the shows because he was out there still. So we went to Chicago. When we went to New York, back to New York, you came out to Chicago. She had him come to the theater every night to make sure that everybody was alive during half hour before showtime. And then when everybody was fine, he would go off. But he would show up with his blonde girlfriend. I mean, knowing full well he wasn't going to be doing anything. And we were so incensed that he got paid for the 2 weeks to not do anything, except show up and lord it over us that he didn't have to play. Yeah. So it was kind of crazy.
There's dozens of names that come to mind. The Kishmans, the Marshall Crenshaws, Jimmy Poe. None of those guys were New Yorkers. Is that right?
No.
Right.
What do you call it? When I went to do Chicago, when I went to do San Francisco, when they flew me out for those reviews, Glenn came back to Broadway, and you guys, one of you guys saw that show where he did yesterday. His uncle was very deathly ill, or his grandfather or somebody, and he said, I would like to play a show for him so his family member was in attendance, and he sings yesterday, and he was so nervous. He went into Why She Had to the third time. And I remember everybody watching, the orchestra in the back just watching, going like, okay, keep playing. Because he just kept going. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Turn to the page back in the sheet music. I remember that.
Yeah.
If you'd be kind enough, Mitch, to read these out.
My eyes will let me.
Hey, it's
Hi,
George.
guys. Oh, look who's here. George. I don't even want to read the comment. I love George Trellinger. Hi, guys. I had the privilege of working with Lenny on an oldies cruise with Bob Miller, David Leon, and Louis Colucci back in the 90s. Yeah, this show would be remiss if we didn't talk about Louis Colucci.
Great.
And I think that was the beginning of the flu. I think that caused the worldwide pandemic of 1987.
It's just been in hibernation. That's all.
Hi, George.
What?
Yeah, George
Hi,
did
George.
he did a great Buddy Holly, as I recall. On that,
Yeah, he's great.
Also, there's a great Ed Sullivan.
Sullivan, of course.
Yeah, amazing Ed Sullivan. He's an amazing musician, but now he's known for his Ed Sullivan.
That's right.
I saw him do Buddy Holly because we were doing one of those Beatle tours, vans, whatever it was, something that we went through Las Vegas, and it was Mike Palakas, me, Steve Landis as George.
Wow.
And I forgot, was it Justin still? Justin did some of these tours, but it might not have been. Maybe Jimmy Pappas. So we ended up going to watch the show at the Imperial Palace. And you got to see everybody with the Elvis, and George was an amazing Buddy Holly. He was absolutely great. And Louis was in the band in the house band.
We could write a book about Louis Colucci too. That's
my God. I mean, talk about somebody's mother. Lenny, you have the best line. Thanks for the visual, Mrs. Colucci.
I don't know what is this rated R, but I would call Louis' house, and Louis lived in the Bronx, and he was like every typical character you would see in a Robert De Niro, Martin Scorsese film.
I will tell you what is. Never mind. Yeah.
Let me tell you.
Okay,
I'll tell you later.
Somebody can read it out.
I saw Beatlemania in the 70s, and Mitch, and I met you, Mitch, at one of Charles's conventions. I got my picture with you. Well, that was the only convention I did with you, Charles. So how about that? That's great.
That's right. It was an amazing convention. We called it the Beatlemania All-Star Cast, and it was Steve did Lennon, Steve Landis, and it was it Justin or Teely? And then
it was Justin and Leslie. You actually had Leslie.
Right. So it was the three originals plus that. So that was great. Well, ironically, Alan and Lenny have done so many more shows for me through the years, and we should put in a plug for the fact that Lenny's been one of the main members of the cast of Beatlemania, Carlo, for all these years, and Alan is now with Beatlemania again, right? And
That's right. Rich.
I do
a lot of shows.
I do All You Need Is Love in Europe. That's
And
the
All You Need
largest,
Is Love.
one of the largest Beatles shows ever. So
You
Are
wouldn't
you
know.
also? Are you
wouldn't
still
know
playing
what
with
I
Beatle
think.
Majesty as well sometimes, or not, Alan?
with Bobby Taylor, whenever it happens, but you know, it's
Whenever it
Who
happens.
the hell
yeah.
is playing with
we went to
anybody?
Spain together. It was
I want to
wonderful.
know.
What was
Haven't
that?
done a gig in a very long time.
I know. Me neither. Me neither.
This is all pre-COVID. Pre-COVID.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Actually, Alan, I got a text here for you. If you can read it out, Alan, that's for you.
Do the Holly stuff at Epcot. Wow, that's it. When we first started playing at Epcot, we did a mixture of British material. So we did some Beatles and some Hollies, Herman's Hermits, Dave Clark Fight. It was a lot of fun playing a lot of songs that we never got to play before. And I love the
Okay,
Hollies.
here's another one. If you can read it out, Mitch.
Saw Beatlemania on 1991 at the Palace Theater in Waterbury, Connecticut. I think it was one of the first concerts I ever saw. That wasn't me. Which one of you guys was it?
I think it was me.
That was you, Lenny. I think so. Yeah.
That was the bus and truck year. Yeah.
Right. That was it. That's the one.
Let me go get my diary. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Yeah. This
Hey,
one's from
finish the
George
story-
again,
finish the
and he
story
says,
about-
if it wasn't for
Oh,
Beatlemania, they wouldn't have had the Legends concert in Las Vegas.
Ah, I see.
It's interesting.
Cause and
That's
effect,
interesting
huh?
because I mean I don't maybe that was the straw that pushed everybody to get Elvis and everybody together and do a show. I'm not sure. Lenny, finish telling the story about Louis' mother.
Well, Louis, it's oftentimes I would call up to the Bronx to speak to Louis. His mother would answer the phone, and she would always say the most inappropriate thing. And so she would say, "Now Louis not here, but Lenny, I'm nude." And the line was, "Thanks for the visual, Mrs. Colucci."
Yeah. Lenny would go, okay, I know that he's not home now, and thank you for putting on a towel, but I'm gonna hang up now, Mrs. Colucci, and I'm gonna call back to let the machine answer. Lenny would call back, and she'd go, hello?
Hello?
No, Mrs. Colucci, I'm trying to leave a message. Okay, I won't answer this time. She hangs up the phone. He calls back again. Hello?
Hello?
Mitch, I'm going to get you to read this one out now.
What's up, gentlemen? I saw Beatlemania 10 times in New York. Well, I owe you a lunch. I never had the pleasure of seeing Lenny perform, but I did get to see Mitch and Alan during the 10 times I went. Well, that's great, Manny. Thank you so much. That's
You're
great.
too late.
We appreciate it.
It's too late now. You can come to my house,
Let's look
New
back
Jersey.
on Beatlemania.
Why don't we do a live stream on StreamYard? Yeah, that's right.
I want you to tell me what comes in your mind now, like in 20 years' time, and people look back on Beatlemania from the 70s. What are you going to remember, Alan? When people are going to watch this, what do they want you to remember you for? From Beatlemania, tell me.
Remember me for? I was of all of Mitch's stunt doubles, I was the best. I'm still in a lot of pain today. From all the falls I took for him.
Of all the falls I've known before, really.
Yes.
Now, let me ask you as well.
I didn't tell you the story, Plastic.
Okay, tell me the story.
On stage, I'm on stage one day, and I turn around in the middle of the show. I turn around to adjust the amplifier. Tom Teely comes back to me, and he's laughing, and he's not supposed to be laughing. I go, "What's the problem?" He goes, "Hey Al, turn around." I turn around. There was a naked woman standing on the stage in front of us, just dancing. Do you remember that?
Oh my God!
It was great.
I missed that.
Are you serious, or you just blacked out then?
No, I remember that story.
She climbed up on the stage, but I didn't see that part. She climbed up and she just put a thumb down in her, cleavage, and with one move, whoosh, just took it right off.
Was it Louis' mom?
No, it was my mother.
No.
Lenny's mother.
No.
But that was
funny now, as I said. I've got to ask Lenny about his story. Tell me about what you're going to remember about Beatlemania. You want people to remember you for Beatlemania?
Well, rather than my memory of the experience, I would just like to say that I've made some of the best friends of my life. Now it's 40 years on, and so many of these guys are lifelong friends, and that's That's the best thing I got out of it. Was that, but was these friendships that I could never put a price tag on or quantify in any way. But I would hope that those that saw me do the show thought I did an okay job, and I tried my best to, evoke the music as I would like to hear it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
What about you, Mitch?
I think what Lenny said is true. I mean, for me, it was always about the experience was great. It's some of the shows stand out, the audiences stand out, some of the performances, the apocryphal stories of the blackout in '77, and we stayed on stage to keep everybody in the theater calm, and we led them in a huge sing-along to Hey Jude, and those things were nice. I mean, those sort of memories. People coming back to meet you that are not even the famous. There were a lot of famous people, but a lot of people coming back years later, getting letters from people. I mean, I used to answer all my fan mail, and somewhere in Carlo's warehouse is a lot of my stuff that he took out of storage that I was storing at a place that Hall & Notes had stuff at. Then I had a falling out with somebody, had to get stuff out of there, so he went and picked it up, and it's in his PSI storehouse, along with T-shirts and stuff that Jen Tiso, his daughter, was going to sell, except that now that she's a busy mom, those T-shirts are still there. But all my fan mail is in there, and over the years, the best thing that happens is when people come up to me and say, "You don't remember this, but I wrote you a fan letter and you wrote me back," and then people will actually show them on Facebook. It's great, and then if you trigger my memory, I mean, as one of my musical friends said, if you ask Mitch what you did on a Wednesday in a particular year, he will tell you what you did, what you wore, where we went, what you ate, who was there. And I think I'm starting to lose that ability right now. But the thing is, there's some of the more moving moments are when somebody said, "You don't know, you sent a letter to my sister because I wrote to you and said," and she was in the hospital almost dying. And I have to tell you, when she got the letter from you, she recovered. I'm going, you have to be kidding me. So there's these are stories. We make a difference in people's lives. You don't think you do it. I mean, but all musicians and all entertainers do. And I know sometimes in a way you never know, and you'll never hear it from anybody. But just like these guys on these posts tonight, I saw it 10 times. I saw you guys 40 years ago. I met you. All those things. These are the things that you do to people. And the same thing that the music and the people before us did for us. I mean, I have memories of, aside from what Lenny said, it's really true. The stuff that I treasured the most was meeting all these people that I played with and worked with, and still in touch with them to this day. What I'm trying to do now is, and guys, you'll have to, Lenny, if your phone number hasn't changed in 30 years, I'm going to call it, because I'm starting to use the phone again. Because all this stuff about typing and texting and stuff, it's great for short messages, but if I want to catch up with somebody, I think it's time to pick up the phone.
Yeah.
And we've always been good at that. Even through one time, Lenny and I had a falling out because of Ken Craddy and his crazy wife put a nail between the two of us. We were going to Puerto Rico. I don't know if you even remember this. We didn't talk. We didn't talk forever, and then eventually we made up. And it was at a time when your daughter was graduating, so I got Mariah Carey to sign something for her. But it was like, yeah, I got her to sign a picture for you and send it to you. You gave it to your daughter.
I believe that. Yes, I remember that vaguely.
Yeah.
But
no, it was funny.
Having a crossword with you, but I think
my God, it was terrible.
I think we should start
promoter.
Fine. Can you feel this when I do this? Wait.
Yeah.
The other way. The other way.
Wait, the other way.
You.
Why you ought to.
I want to reiterate what Lenny just said, because I've booked so many of the Beatlemania groups at conventions, at my Catskills weekends, at so many events. And I became, the friendships that become, forever, it makes it all worthwhile. It's really special. And you look at, Mitch, and you look at Lenny here, and when these guys, throw that wig on or throw on the suit, you may not see it now, but gosh, they become the guys they're playing, and you can see their love of what they're doing. And it really makes it special, not just for them. I'm sure it's got to be special for them, but not for the people who are watching it, but for me on the side, being this guy who booked the show. It brings me such pleasure to have, worked with these guys. They're all consummate professionals and really, if I may say, all sweethearts, really great guys. I consider you friends, and I'm so glad that we're able to do this little get together, because I don't think there's ever been this opportunity of three guys with such pedigree playing McCartney, for so many years, being together in one forum. Plastic, thanks to you making it happen.
Well, I got to thank you, Charles. I got to thank Alan. I got to thank Lenny, and I got to thank Mitch. And I want you to know that by treating those boards on Broadway, how much happiness and enjoyment you've given to people at that golden time when people went out and really enjoyed their shows, and that's what's in their memories, the great times, the happiness that you brought to them. And I just want to thank you here from Australia, because I can only dream what it must have been like going out the first time on stage and playing Paul to a Broadway show. It's like something you can only imagine in a lifetime that you actually do, because it's like, it blows my mind. And especially when you got to meet Michael Jackson too, Mitch, and all those celebrities with Studio 54 across the road. I mean, come on. You're talking pre-disco or into the disco. I mean, this is an unbelievable
it was into disco.
time that's never coming back.
No, but to me, the experience of going to the studio was because we were in rehearsals next to Studio 54. So Steve Rebell and those guys used to invite us there all the time. Joey and I would go all the time and just hang out. And it was, when they said the party was in Studio 54, it was kind of like, hey, that's great, but I've been there before. So
my nose aches just at the memory,
I know. Well, my nose didn't ache till a few years later, because I was like that sort of medicinal thing used to hinder me tremendously, because I couldn't sing. I couldn't sing. Well, yeah, I couldn't sing.
I discovered that drugs are bad.
Drugs are bad. Say no to drugs.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right, guys, I want to thank you
if you've done them. That's right.
It's been a worldwide exclusive here. Thank you. Thanks
Thank
again.
you. We have to talk.
Original
Plastic,
Paul.
Mitch, I love you guys all. Thank you so much. I hope we can get
yeah.
together one day when this is all over,
I hope so.
Definitely.
Great job, guys.
Definitely.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Charles.